Hello, my name is Ken O'Brien, and I currently serve as the President of the University Faculty Senate. We're gathered in Albany today to interview Dr. David Lavallee, the Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Provost of the State University, about the hottest topic on many of our campuses, the systems initiative called Shared Services. First mentioned by Chancellor Zimfer in her State of the University address in January, Shared Services reappeared in June when the Board of Trustees passed a resolution that authorized the Chancellor to direct the state-operated institutions to identify and implement plans to improve efficiency, generate cost savings, build capacity, and increased resources available to the core academic missions of campuses. The savings generated through such measures were needed to address repeated budget cuts in recent years and to devote more resources to the core academic services and strategic missions of the campuses. In late July, a memo went from the administration to the campuses that explained the implementation of two distinct but related forms of shared services, those within largely regionally based alliances and 6 others that were expected to move at different speeds toward shared presidencies. During the past month and a half, protests registered disapproval, especially for the 2 campuses in the North Country, SUNY Canton and SUNY Potsdam. And this month, the board approved a second resolution clarifying its position on shared presidencies, endorsing such a solution as, quote, a reasonable and valid option within shared services. The campuses at Morrisville and SUNY IT in Utica and those at Delhi and Cobleskill were to continue working toward shared presidencies, submitting recommendations to the board in November. As for Canton and Potsdam, the 2 sitting presidents there were directed to continue working toward shared services and more to prepare a joint report due to the Chancellor on March 30, 2012, addressing the issues involving a shared presidency for these 2 campuses. I think that brings us up to date. Right now, I would like to introduce the other members of the panel, or more particularly, have them introduce themselves. First.
My name is Tremaine Price. I'm an undergraduate student at the University at Albany, majoring in public policy and management. I'm also a member of the SUNY Student Assembly, where I serve as the President's Chief of Staff.
I'm Shadi Shahidipur Sandvik. I'm an Associate Professor of Nanoengineering at UAlbany.
I'm Philip Ortiz. I'm faculty at Empire State College, where I chair the College Senate, but I'm here today as the chair of the Committee for Diversity and Cultural Competence of the University Faculty Senate.
Thank you. And Ken O'Brien introduced me at the beginning by his introductory remarks. I'm David Lavallee. I had an opportunity to talk with senators at a planning meeting recently, and I've had the opportunity to go to a few campuses, but rather than trying to go to 64 campuses and maybe several meetings at different campuses, what we thought would be a good idea is if we did a question and answer session much like we had with senators in one spot that could be available for others to view. This is not the end all. If there are questions or other things that arise after this, certainly my office and my staff and myself, we're always very interested in talking to individuals and making sure you get the answers that you'd like to have. So I'm ready to start. Let's see what the questions look like.
Trey, our student, would you please ask the first question?
Okay. Provost Lavallee, it is our understanding that the goal of the Shared Services Initiative, either through campus alliances or shared presidencies, is to reduce the administrative overhead on individual campuses to deliver academic programs more effectively. How will you and we know that the savings, if there are any at all, from the Shared Services Initiative will remain on the campuses and will move from administrative services back to academics?
It's an excellent question, Trey, because it's really at the heart of whether or not this has an impact. And so each of our campuses reports their expenditures to us each year. So we allocate money to the campuses. There's a lot of discretion on the campuses about how that money is spent, but it is spent in several categories. For human resources, for individuals that are hired, for equipment and so on. It's all budgeted to departments and schools and campuses. So we're actually able to divide that to the teaching faculty, to those that are in, say, teaching and learning centers, libraries, and other academic support areas. And then we have general support, maintenance, and so on. So what we want to look at is how much of that money is in the core categories that we have for delivering instruction and directly supporting instruction, advisors, library, those kinds of things, and how much is maintaining your buildings, doing your general administration, and so on. And we'll be looking at those percentages and see how they shift.
Sean?
Professor Lavallee, my question is with regard to how the state aid is distributed to campuses. And in particular, we have been told that the new formula for distributing state aid works to the disadvantage of the smaller campuses, since they will lose their special item administrative overhead. So basically, this constitutes a significant loss in the state support. How long will these campuses have to adjust their administrative costs before the full force of the formula takes effect? And the second question is, how can these campuses possibly move money from administration to academics when they have to scramble so hard to make up the lost support already?
Good. Well, there's a bit of a complicated question. So I'm going to start back a bit to say, well, how do we fund the campuses? And currently, the way that we have been funding the campuses is about 60% of that money goes according to an enrollment formula, which depends on how many students you have in which program and whether they're lower division, upper division, or graduate. And then what is the relative cost of that program? So you get more money if you have a more expensive mix of programs. The other part, which is very large, has been handled by over 150 specific line items to the campuses. Among those line items was a line item for small campuses to help them with their extra administrative costs. If we look at the campuses that are about 3,500 or below, almost to 4,000, but 3,500 and below very clearly, those costs were computed in the formula to be about 1.8 million more than a campus that had about 5,000 or more students. So in that form, in those allotments of the 150 lines, one of them was a line for that. But there are lots of other ones too. So we don't think the small campuses will lose a full 1.8 million. But if we go to a new formula, which after a year's work with the strategic plan, there's a committee, resource allocation team that had campus representatives. If we go to what they have been proposing, we would still have the enrollment piece, but it would probably be a little richer. That is, there'd be a little more money in it. And the other piece would not be 150 line items. It would be a factor to say, what kind of campus do you have? What type of comparison funding looks to be reasonable for your campuses? So let's go back now. It means that we have a new paradigm that for our technology campuses, small campuses in particular, puts a greater emphasis, frankly, on enrollment. And we need to build that enrollment. We need to have more classes and higher enrollment so that they can compete. Now, in terms of timing, we wanted to start this now with the regular funding for this full academic year. So we've got sort of a one-year head start. When we put the new formula in play next year, we expect that to ramp down. We won't do it immediately. We will do it over a period of probably 3 or 4 years, so that the campuses have time to plan to make up for that difference. With regard to what's happening on our paired campuses, there are already savings being realized that we know will take effect next year, and they're significant. So we think that given 3 years, we hope these campuses will adjust to have a lower administrative overhead, be able to offer more classes, and get themselves to a much more stable position.
Thank you.
Bill?
Provost Lavallee, one of the elements of the Board of Trustees resolution on shared services addressed academic programs. What is the role of campus governance in making the decisions regarding the sharing of academic credits, courses, or programs?
Well, that is the role of faculty. I think, you know, we've been working now about a little over 4 years on a mobility project, and it takes time. We want to do it right, but it is a negotiation that faculty have to do from one campus to another. So at this point, of course, we have a block of general education requirements, up to 30 credits, that already will go between the campuses. And we now have generally at least 15 credits in each of the most popular majors that we've agreed upon. And then campuses will decide whether there are other courses that fit and they can take for articulation. The big push that we have on the administrative side for sharing of courses and making courses on one campus available to a partner campus, to students at a partner campus, is in the administrative part. That is, we want to make it easier for a course that is accepted in transfer for the student to go get permission for that course, get registered for it at the other campus, and get the credit back on their transcript to be a lot easier than it is now. I think in Ken's role at Brockport, he knows that there are an awful lot of steps to this. It can be delayed. It can take 6 months for the whole thing to happen. We want to work so that that's a lot smoother.
And somewhat of a follow-up, where do you see online instruction going in within the shared services paradigm?
I think there are great opportunities for online instruction. We had a meeting a few weeks ago of the executive committee of the provost, and one of the representatives from the technology sector said, you know, we're paired up with a comprehensive college for our administrative services, but our curriculum is all lined up with other technology colleges all over the state and not with that campus. So we don't see too much curriculum going there. But she said, you know, in engineering technology, we always have trouble with like Calculus 3 or some other course. Sometimes we can't offer it. We don't get enough students. The student gets off by a year. So she said, you know, if we get together on the low enrolled courses in the technology sector where we have common curricula, if we put those online and put out a schedule 2 semesters in advance, students could make their way to a degree. And so we're now talking with SLN and with Empire State College to put together sort of a union catalog of online courses and getting campuses to ask them to see if they can put the ones they're sure of out 2 semesters in advance. And I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you.
I think that brings me to think in terms of shared governance. And what is the proper role for shared governance in particularly the alliances, which involve multi-campus configurations? And how will system administration make certain that that proper role is respected across SUNY? Well,
that is really imperative. We really want to ensure that the traditional roles of each constituency on the campus are respected when we do the shared services. So where this, I think, is going to, you know, really require us to look very carefully is where, as we're seeing now in some of these pairings, that we could have a new degree come about. That there's a series of courses on one campus, or maybe a degree, and there's something on the other campus that's in the same discipline, but it's not quite there, and they have things that they can offer. So an example might be a campus that has a traditional psychology degree and a campus that has a very directed applied psychology degree. If they can work it out so that the students can take courses in the regular psychology program over here that are base courses for this, they may be able to expand that program. They may be able to expand it in different directions. But then the faculty have to get together to decide what are the requirements for the degree, how are we going to accept that. So I think there will be a lot of cross-campus conversations that maybe haven't gone on before. The other piece has to do with what the constituencies have to say about a president when they're appointed, or the searches. And I think that, you know, when there's a search de novo, when there is not a president sitting, then you would need to have joint governance input into that. When it's a president that's vacant and then another president, the chancellor, asks to become president of that campus, We need to get recommendations from constituencies, but how that whole search process will work out, we're still working with the Board of Trustees.
I have a somewhat similar question, but I think it has a little different twist. I know certainly, and I think anyone who's worked with you know of your personal commitment to shared governance. And it's deeply appreciated by those of us who've been able to work with you in recent years. What is it that you and your office can do to make certain that that commitment goes across this system, particularly in terms of the complications that will arise for shared governance with the alliances?
That's a very good question, because we are to some extent in some uncharted territory here. There are some other examples around the country, but the most common example where you have the shared presidencies or campuses are branch campuses. And those are pretty easy because it's just the same policy transplanted. Every time you start a branch campus, you use the same policies. So now we got two different policies coming in together. I think that what we need to do, part of it we need to work together is, let's say we have a shared curriculum proposal. Let's say that psychology, applied psychology, branches out into a new area, and now they want to actually offer a joint degree, a dual degree. In that case, we have to say, well, when they submit that kind of program, what kind of requirements do we need to have in that submission that both governance groups have signed off? That's the kind of thing we can do on the curriculum level to make sure that that's been done. I think the other part of it is we want to work from the academic side with the Board of Trustees so that when guidelines for selections of presidents come, if it's a joint selection, that we make sure that the representation of constituencies is specific and spelled out.
Thank you very much.
Can I follow up just a little
Sure.
bit? I think the root of this question is that during these fiscally tight times, administrations may feel that they have to move quickly and that governance is a slow and purposeful process. Right. And so I think there's a temptation to sort of move around governance, consult governance perhaps after the fact. And I think the root of the question is, how do you empower the campus presidents and charge the campus presidents to make sure that they consult with governance in advance of making some of their difficult decisions?
Well, we are working on a board resolution that talks to even the case of having one sitting president become the president of another campus. And we think that part of that is that there needs to be the appropriate consultation with constituencies beforehand, and a recommendation to the chancellor beforehand. That wording has not been all worked out, but I think that that's a very important consideration. And I think I know somebody at the table who's going to pay a lot of attention to that, so that's good.
I think you know 4 people at the table are going to pay a lot of attention to it.
Yes, but one in particular.
Well, I would just remind you that the form that was created, I believe, last year for program decertification has a checkoff about consultation. And I think that as we go forward, it would be wise for all of us to take a look at appropriate opportunities for such checkoffs, particularly certainly as they apply to curriculum. But there's so many other issues raised by shared services on the administrative side that affect the way in which courses and programs are delivered that we might want to look a little bit more broadly.
True. And I think, one of the things that we went through, sort of part of the evolution on that with the suspension of majors and then of degree programs eventually, that when that was first instituted, I think some of the students, some of the campuses didn't really realize what we meant by consultation with faculty and governance, and so it wasn't with the full elected governance by the normal channels. And we've had to make clear that that's what the expectation is, that it's really not talking with some members of governance or talking with some students. It's really going through the same kind of channels you do when you start up a program. So the consultation would be with the curriculum committee and with the head of governance and so on.
Thank you. I have another follow-up question, if I may. these shared services, alliances, do you think it's important that students play a significant role in these discussions? And if so, what role do you think that students can play both at the SUNY-wide level and on their individual campuses?
I think it's a good question, Trey, and I think it also links back to the shared services. Now, not all may agree with this, but I think that when you look at the shared services, there's a whole range of kinds of things. And I think what we have to be very attentive to is what groups does a particular part of shared services affect. So, there are certain very deep level accounting programs that as long as you get the service and things are working right and everybody has the right number on their balance sheets, it really is not a major issue for students or faculty. But once you start talking about curriculum, or if you start talking about even, I think, for example, if you had two campuses close together and you were going to share advising services or library services or something like that, it affects both students and faculty. And you want to know, are we going to get better service as a result of this, or are things going to get worse? And I have heard some interesting proposals, actually, that are in the works for shared services that involve community colleges as well as the state-operated campuses, where campuses near each other, especially those that have quite a few commuter students, are looking at adjusting their computer lab and library hours so that they have a greater number of hours available, and students from any one of the campuses can use the other campus's facility. Now that would be really positive. Well, it wouldn't be positive if one campus says, well, you're all doing it, so we'll quit. You want to be sure that there's still something available on the campus, but it could be positive, and I think those kind of discussions would benefit from the students. You say, well, you have a certain amount of money, we can schedule it these different ways. What's really going to work best for students? And if it's the library, it's students and faculty.
And you touched on the presidential searches. So many campus constituencies, are concerned about the, increasing advice that presidential searches be, closed. So why has system moved towards the recommendation for closed presidential searches? And how can we make certain that the process itself is open and that in terms of shared services, that both campuses have an opportunity to gauge whether a candidate is fit for their individual campus, and if a candidate has the opportunity to evaluate that community themselves?
Right. So far, we have used 3 closed searches that I'm aware of. And in each case...
David, I'm sorry, could you define a closed search for those out there?
Right. And in some respects, it can be a pejorative term, whether it's closed or open, because closed is bad and open is good. But a closed search is one in which the number of individuals that are involved in selecting the presidential candidates that are recommended to the chancellor is strictly limited, and it's representational in general. That is, there are elected representatives to a search committee from the faculty, from professional staff, and so on. And that search committee, which may be about 20 individuals, something on that order, those individuals and very few others actually go through and interview the candidates. In the traditional search or the open search, after that phase is done and the group is narrowed to somewhere usually between 3 and 5 candidates, those finalists come to the campus, they meet with all constituencies, comments are gathered back, and then the College Council takes those comments into account when it makes its final recommendations. We have found that in certain very high-profile cases, generally involving research universities, what's happening now across the country is that individuals do not want it publicly known that they are looking at opportunities outside their home campus. This can cause them a lot of difficulty on their home campus. And so they will not apply to a search that is not what I will call representative rather than closed, but it's closed. They won't apply to that kind of a search. So, and frankly, we found this to be the case, that the search pool that you get at the research universities is very different. If you tell candidates it's going to be a small search rather than a large search. You know, there are a lot of interesting factors. I mean, you can look to see with the traditional search, how often does the group change when you do the open part of the search and so on. Most of the time, the same priority the college council had going in comes out. So that happens if they've done a good job and they've really chosen people that fit the campus. If they don't, well, then you get a lot of shakeup. But we do not see this becoming the normal paradigm, because as it turns out, our candidates for our comprehensive colleges, our technical colleges, even our specialized colleges, that tends not to be the same situation for those sectors. And we've gotten very good pools. And it's traditional. If you look around the country, the comparable institutions, the state colleges and AACSU, they tend to do open searches. So I think that this will be a very limited phenomenon.
This is actually a related question, and you may have already answered part of it, so I apologize if it's a repeat. But can we have a meaningful search process for shared presidents when the candidates, no matter how well qualified they are selected by SUNY system rather than recommended by a search committee from a national search pool?
Well, we wouldn't have that happen, because if we are sharing with a sitting president, two institutions, one with a vacancy, and we share the president we're sharing came through a national search. They were not appointed by system administration to that job. They came through the search and they were appointed. Now they didn't come through a search from the other campus. So we want input from the other campus, from the college council and from constituencies on that campus. This would only happen the initial round. Once the presidents that are in this configuration right now retire, finish their career, it could be 20 years, but the average for a president is about 6, that when those presidents finish, then the next search, we hope with the Board of Trustees' approval, that'll be a joint search where both campuses are represented and they together search for the president. And when we look at the campuses that we're putting together, the combinations are about the same size and actually not too much different in complexity from colleges that we have throughout the system that have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 students, and the number of faculty and departments and different degree programs, they stack up fairly similarly when you put the two together. So the complexity a president is used to handling on a campus shouldn't be too different for these cases.
I'd like actually to follow up. So how can campus constituents then have a genuine voice in the selection of their president?
Well, the voice in selection of the president is whether or not they view the other president as a qualified, suitable president. But it's not picking from everybody. What we have seen in quite a few cases now is that this is not so unusual in the regular case, because we've had failed searches quite often. Interims have been appointed that could not run in those cases. And after the failed search, then they are allowed to apply, and they've been the sole candidate, and they've become the president. So that's happened in a number of cases as well. You know, so we're not dealing with a de novo situation. We've already got sitting presidents in some of these shared campuses, and so that's a situation that we're working through.
Okay, thank you.
At the risk of imbalancing the discussion toward shared presidencies as opposed to shared services, I have one more question on the shared presidency. And it's beyond procedure. Procedure will work itself out. It seems to many that the contemporary presidency of a small, medium, or large campus has one new value that crosses all, and that is that the president is becoming increasingly a spokesperson for the campus to external constituencies. Isn't that a real difficulty when a president, a single person, it becomes the spokesperson for a complex series of constituencies for very different kinds of institutions?
You know, I think it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that, frankly, some candidates would really relish, because it's a bigger opportunity than one single small campus. You know, when you're at even a middle-sized campus, an 8,000, 7,500 student campus like New Paltz, you actually have some very different constituencies. The people that you talk to about the School of Business, very often in the meetings I go to there, are very different from the ones I do for the performing arts, or had done for the performing arts. And so when you go to the a group that's interested in the performing arts, our friends of the theater, our friends of the library, actually, whatever, you're being an advocate for that particular part of what you do. Even in fundraising, you tend to go for what a particular donor is interested in. In a fortunate way, the institutions we have in SUNY have their distinctiveness, each one of them. And particularly in these pairs where we're talking about shared presidencies, they are somewhat different institutions. And so you're not going for the same donors for a technology program as you are for a music program. And I think that that's helpful. We'd be in more trouble if we tried to put two very similar institutions together that sort of competed on the same programs, and where, you know, if you're going and you're talking to a group that's interested in supporting history development, you know, an endowed chair in history, you know, well, there's two departments and there's two that you've got to talk about. So, but then usually you're going to alums, or you're going to friends of a particular school. I think it's a skill a president needs to have. What we are seeing more and more in fundraising, frankly, is that the units and the deans are very often doing the fundraising. I mean, in my own case, I try to be generous to my alma mater and to my former employer, New Paltz, and I have never been contacted by a president. I have been contacted by students, I've been contacted by deans, I've been contacted by former faculty. So, you know, we have to say, you know, what is the proper place and role of the president? It is to be the public face, but it also needs to be the person who makes the final decisions on tenure and budgets and all those things that need to be done internally.
Any other questions from the group?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you very
David,
much again
any
for the
last
opportunity.
words?
Just that, again, we do like to hear comments. We have various kinds of constituency groups that we meet with, usually on a biannual basis around the system. If you're a member of one of those groups, you know, please ask questions at the meeting so other people can benefit. If not, or you just come up with something in between the meetings of those groups, please let us know and we'll try to answer your questions. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
The last piece I would like to say is that, first of all, thank you very much, David, for being willing to submit yourself to these questions. Thank you to all members of the Executive Committee and the members of the Senate who participated in the dialogue almost 2 weeks ago now, from which the genesis of this came. And for everyone to understand that our stake in this process is not only on a system level, but it's on a campus by campus level. It's within every alliance, and it's on every campus. And what we've heard today, to my mind, is giving us a green light to pursue shared governance within the alliances, within shared services, and to make the system potentially more efficient and allow us to increase the service we offer on the academic side. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.